Let's take a look at rational expressions and see which values would need to be excluded. In other words, what value of the unknown do I substitute and then get undefined? You can actually check that in Desmos calculator once you figure this out, but everything is really just dependent on what's happening on the bottom. If the bottom is 0 and the top is not, then you have a problem because, as you know, division by 0 is not allowed. You need to ignore the top and just make the bottom equal 0 and solve for the unknown variable. Let's take a look at the first example. Here the bottom is 2s. So we're just going to say, okay, 2s equal to 0. When does that happen? Well, remember this is multiplication, so we can go ahead and divide by 2, which is going to cancel it. And then 0 divided by 2 is just 0. What that means is s equals 0 is when it's undefined. That's going to go over here. The next expression, again, we are going to start with just looking at the bottom. We don't care about the top. We assume that that's not going to be 0 at the same time. We've got 4y minus 2 equals 0. Again, remember, this is just the bottom, not the top. The bottom dividing by 0 is not allowed. Okay, let's add 2 to both sides. That is going to cancel it here. And then we're going to wind up with 4y equal, well, 0 plus 2 is equal to 2. Finally, to solve this for y, remember that the default operation is multiplication. We are going to divide both sides by 4. And that is going to cancel it over here. And then 2 over 4. I'm not sure if we need to reduce, but just in case, 2 over 4 is the same as 1/2, so we can put 1/2 over here. Finally, the last question, that one is probably the most challenging because we have to factor. Why do we have to factor? Because we want to solve when this expression, and this is just a quadratic, when is that equal to 0? And remember, we do that by using something called zero factor property. If we can factor, and then we can set each expression equal to 0, then we can figure out when the whole thing can be 0. All right, what we're looking for is two numbers such as multiplied, they give you -8, which means that one of them is positive, the other one is negative, and added would give you 2. Okay, what are these numbers? What is going to be divisible? Well, that would be like -2, +4. So let's take a look at some of these combinations. So -2, +4. Does that add up to 2? Well, yes, actually. So that's going to be it. That's really all we have to do. This is just p minus 2. P plus 4 equals 0. And we would just figure this out by considering all combinations of numbers that would multiply to -8 and add to 2. Now, finally, we just have to solve each equation by the zero factor property. We say either the first factor is 0 or the second. If I set p minus 2 equals 0, by adding 2 to both sides, I will just get p equals 2. If I set p plus 4 equals 0, then by subtracting 4 from both sides, I get p equals -4. All right, so we've got p equal 2 and p equal -4. And then over here, we would just type 2, -4, and we'll be done.